are you? So, today we're gonna talk about a lot, but two topics mainly ish, kind of. Well, two different court cases on one topic, and then the two different people that are the main people of that. But then we're also gonna be talking about just general starting up a business, and I'm gonna do a reaction to this other how to start a startup thing. Um, and the first reaction I did to this how I started startup playlist, on the first video in that playlist was the first video I did on the Raylee Ricavina, Raylee Wells, um, and Kaze or Cynderra White um situation. And so that video that has like a 14, I think, video playlist, so highly recommend checking that out. I said checking that out, not trucking, whatever. And I got the names wrong too, but the right names linked in the description of this video, the Rayleigh playlist. You can go figure it out. But yeah, before we start all of that too, the reason I had said that was because you know what? My mind, I'm looping, my bad, spiraling. Okay, getting out of there. Before we get there though, this isn't really specifically about the Madeline Pendleton situation. In terms of like, I'm not gonna go into full detail about all of that again, but I did have some additional thoughts after my last video processing some of the things, and so just a few of the things where I was thinking like something that we can all struggle with, as human beings. Like I know I have, I'm sure you may have potentially, but something that I really see Madeline, I think, potentially struggling with, but potentially not aware of, could be like it could be individualistic to consider yourself a thought leader on progress without doing the community organizing. And in looking for community from not accepting the world as it is, I think some people have turned to trying to lead others without ever having guidance or teachings for themselves because they're just trying to go off of what they know they don't like about the world. But I feel that mentorship and community connection will help you articulate and define what you're currently experiencing but haven't processed yet. Um, and so that's why you do need that community organizing, you need that guidance. And it's like the old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Um, you know what I'm saying? So I just feel like, that's where some people I feel are lacking, where they have like a really good ability to gain momentum and to gain an audience and things like that. But the audience will be based on individualism rather than community organizing, and that's where there's a lack of productivity between the thoughts and action. That makes sense. I don't know if I'm making sense. But yeah, so I just had like those little thoughts like after my last rambles about everything. But yeah, so what I'm about to do now is I'm gonna roll my intro. We're gonna recap the whole Phil Anschutz AEG situation. I feel like this is a terrible introduction. Sorry guys. And then I'm going to just recap the first court case that we did on that, the Loper Bright Enterprise versus Chevron. Not Chevron, versus Raimondo. I can't speak. Did I even put that right in the description of this video? I'm gonna have to go check that. I'm gonna have to edit that. Is this right? No, it's not right. Nothing to see here. Anyway. But, so, um, I'm going to show you guys the playlist I did. We'll just go over the past videos. We'll go over the past court case where Gorsuch was asked to recuse himself the first time. And then we're going to look at where he's being asked to recuse himself again now. And we're just going to check out some articles about it this time. And then in another live, I think I will do like a deeper coverage of this next specific court case. And then I'm going to do a reaction to the second video. Um, so previously we had been starting the How to Start a Startup playlist. And it's a lecture series from Stanford University. And it's posted by Y Combinator. I said Y, not wine. The captioner is wrong, but you know what I mean, I think. Um, fucking, yeah, anyway, so we did lecture 1 the first time, so it's the How to Start a Startup playlist. And lecture 1 is also called How to Start a Startup. So we did that the first time. And we're in the same playlist, but now we're moving on to the second lecture on Team and Execution by Sam Altman. And we're just going to watch that. I think I'm going to do it on like 1.75 speed. But that actual video is linked in the description of this video if you want to go watch that regularly or without my rambling. Because I'm going to do like a whole reaction commentary to it to see how I feel about it now compared to how I felt when I first watched it the first time, is kind of what I'm doing there. So yeah, sorry again for this weird ass intro, but whatever, we're here now. I am going to fucking start my intro and get started. Hi, my name is Lexie, aka Deaf Child. I'm born deaf, hard of hearing. Deafness runs in my family genetically. Speech is not fully accessible to me. My team was one of the top teams between 2020 and 2024 in New Orleans and Louisiana. I began doing business as Deaf Child in 2013, marketing 2011, and sales 2009. I've earned 50 plus certifications in marketing and sales. And I have my Bachelor of Science from Loyola University, New Orleans, with a Music Industry Studies major and a Business Administration minor. Visit my site at noladeafchild.com. Okay, so first of all, let's do a recap on the general Phil Anschutz AEG Neil Gorsuch coverage. And then I will get into a recap on the last court case about them we covered specifically. So it all started with, well, the first video I did on this was 6 months ago, but I've been talking about them online and posting about them on my website. I think I first posted about them on Facebook in either 2017 or 2018. I think it may have been 2017. And I'm relatively certain I posted about them on my website in 2018. I did not look or pull this up before I checked. So I'm just guessing off of memory right now. Anyway, but I first noticed Phil Anschutz of AEG's connection to Neil Gorsuch when I was looking into where the money was going for all of the shows and major production companies in the music industry as it relates to AEG. Because AEG is Anschutz Entertainment Group, and I said Anschutz like Philip Anschutz, but so yeah, they own a series of festivals, venues, as well as like promotion production companies, etc. Like it's a whole conglomerate in just the music side alone, on top of how it's connected to other areas of the entertainment industry in terms of arenas, sports arenas, and sports teams and things like that too. Like it's a whole thing. Um, and there's more to it. This is like a really shitty summary probably, but we're here. So, I first noticed Neil Gorsuch and Philip Anschutz's ties when I was tracing the money in terms of looking at where our money goes from who profits the most from these types of events and things. What is he doing with it? And I see these political ties, including Neil Gorsuch, and I was like, this does not feel right. Let me keep my eye on this and just keep a lookout for court cases because things about it don't feel right. And so the first court case that really stuck out to me, and I was just like, wow, was the Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo case regarding the Chevron deference. And DEFERECENCE. Did I spell that right? Fuck, I cannot think. I feel like I can't speak. I can't spell. I don't think I'm even saying that right. I'm sorry. Whatever. I'm not an attorney. Okay. Um. Fucking. So we did that. That shit. All right. I first covered it before the final decision was issued, so I covered what I had known about it up until that point. And then once the final decision was issued, I covered the final rulings on it. Um, and basically, they overturned that shit, and we'll get here now. Moving on, let's get into because now we're here now. We're on this fucking. So from SCOTUS blog, we'll just do an overview with Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. Um, I have this linked in the description of the video, which got the whole thing. So the final decision was issued June 28th, 2024. So this is all said and done now. But basically, it overruled the Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council portion regarding the EPA, the Environmental Protection Act, or something like that. Agency, not act. Is it agency? EPA? Fuck. Look. I know I sound like I don't know shit. It's because I am happy to admit what I do and do not know. Okay. Fucking. Cause I don't know shit about this shit. Like, what the fuck does the EPA stand for? That's agency, right? Damn, I could just Google this. Look, I got a fucking computer. 2 computers. Well, 3. You can't your cell phone. Computers. Fucking, alright. Anyway, so, but, to poorly summarize it up, the whole reason it's a big deal is it makes it so there's less, ability for the agency, for the federal government, and for the federal agency to make some decisions related to and enforce some things related to what bitches are doing in terms of like environmental, energy, and transportation sectors. And so where laws would have been enforced by the EPA, now it's supposed to be like put more through the court system and things like that, to my understanding, and I could be wrong. Again, I'm not an attorney. This is just my interpretation of legal analysis. Please go look into this shit yourself. All right. Fucking. So, this is from that court case. Back then, Neil Gorsuch was urged to recuse himself from this case due to his ties to the oil baron. So let's see how it all connects here. Okay, you with me? It's all connected. Swear to God. Fucking, so, basically, people were asking him to recuse himself for this one too. because overturning the Chevron deference stripped power from the federal agencies, harming ability to serve everyday Americans. Um, and the billionaire oil baron Philip Anschutz would score big from this because he owns a bunch of shit in transportation, oil, big oil, particularly, like he's a major oil tycoon, and all of this. So that's how he's going to benefit in transportation, all of that. You know what I'm saying? Um, I just clicked away from this. What did I do? Okay, sorry. Fucking. Alright, and so people are trying to ask him to recuse himself because of a glaring conflict of interest. He did not recuse himself from this court case. Um, and so this case, it was about considering whether National Marine Fisheries Service can compel fishing vessels to pay the salaries of federal observers, ensuring stocks are not overfished. If they're a federal observer, though, shouldn't the fucking federal bitches fucking pay that shit? That's just me. Anyway, so that's what they use as somehow logic to overturn the Chevron deference. Fucking, and it's because they see the court as a more reliable enforcer of their view of the policy, and they don't want agencies to have the ability to expand or contract their mission. So, yeah. And so this was written before, I think this was written before the final decision, where they were saying Gorsuch indicated he thinks Chevron should go. Um, and so Anschutz has interest in energy, railroads, telecom, real estate, and entertainment. Um, And so, yeah, he owns the Los Angeles Kings and the NHL, a stake in the Los Angeles Galaxy of MLS, and the Coachella Music Festival, as well as Jazz Fest Music Festival and All Winter Circle Productions presents whatever the fuck, WCP, uh, shit, all owned by AEG. And Buku, but is Buku dead? I think Buku's like dead now. Is it dead now? No, it's still alive. It came back. Did it? I can't remember. Shit. I should pay attention. It's kind of like my job. I feel like I blacked that out. No, it totally came back, didn't it? Why can't I remember that? Why am I like wanting to forget it? Anyway. So, yeah. And Anschutz's ties to Gorsuch are public record. And so, yeah, fucking. And I covered all of this more in detail in my previous live streams, which are linked in the description of this video. So go check that out if you want to know more about that first court case. So moving on, now I want to read the letter, fucking, so I don't even know what NEPA stands for, to be honest, but it's a NEPA, NEPA / Gorsuch recusal letter is what this document is labeled as from accountable.us. And so we're just going to read this bitch. It says from October 10th, 2024, the Honorable John G. Roberts Jr., Chief Justice, Supreme Court of the United States, blah, blah, blah. Dear Chief Justice Roberts, we write to you in response to a recently exposed conflict of interest for Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch in the 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado case that the court will decide this term. Justice Gorsuch's close relationship with Philip F. Anschutz, which includes having served as outside counsel to Anschutz's sprawling business empire, requires Justice Gorsuch to recuse from this case as Anschutz's businesses could financially benefit from how the case is decided. He didn't recuse himself the first time, though. I said he did not recuse himself the first time. So why the fuck do, I think he should recuse himself, but I don't know why anyone thinks he's gonna. Like, this is, okay. And then it says, over the past few years, frequent reports of failures to disclose extravagant I can't speak. I know how to say this word, it's fair. Extravagant gifts, influence peddling in elite circles, and ethical violations among justices have caused public trust in the Supreme Court to plummet to record lows. And yet, there are still too many cozy relationships between the justices and billionaires, whose interests often come before the High Court. Each new ethics violation deepens the legitimacy crisis already plaguing your Supreme Court. Justice Gorsuch's recusal in the 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado case is paramount to a court with high ethical standards. This is a joke, right? The Supreme Court has no ethical standards. It's the government. And then it says, this case could weaken one of the few avenues for challenging industry-backed projects with environmentally devastating consequences, likely benefiting Anschutz, whose company's drilling proposals have required environmental assessments at least 86 times. Anschutz's company standing to benefit mightily from the court striking down this regulation, Justice Gorsuch's long-standing ties with Anschutz, and his history of recusing himself from cases involving Anschutz and his companies must not be ignored. The blatant conflict of interest is clear. Therefore, we urge you to take appropriate action to ensure Justice Gorsuch recuses himself from this case. Conflicts of interest involving Justice Neil Gorsuch. Justice Neil Gorsuch's well-known ties to Philip F. Anschutz, the company itself, and Anschutz's potential financial gain from the upcoming case, 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado, makes it clear that a recusal from this case is warranted. Serving as former outside counsel to Anschutz and his companies, speaking at annual hunting retreats on Anschutz's estate, and acquiring an investment property along with Anschutz's business associates, among them an Anschutz Exploration Corporation director, are just a few of the concrete examples of professional and personal connections between Anschutz and Gorsuch. A financial boon for Philip Anschutz and his companies. Even more alarming are the financial benefits to the Anschutz Exploration Corporation should this case be decided in favor of the petitioners and result in a weakening of the National Environmental Policy Act. That's what NEPA stands for. Okay. The Anschutz Exploration Corporation essentially admits to this in the, I don't know how to say this word. Is it, shit. Is it amicus? In the amicus brief, why did I say tied? I'm tongue-tied. In the amicus brief filed on September 4th, 2024, urging the Supreme Court to establish appropriate limits on the scope of National Environmental Policy Act's effects analysis. This case would benefit Anschutz in two key ways. First, the proposed railway, in this case, will likely service Anschutz oil wells in the I can't say this. And a basin, because I can't say this, y'all. I can't. Greenlighting the construction will help to decrease the company's freighting costs and thereby increase profit. Second, In rolling back the National Environmental Policy Act, Anschutz will incur fewer regulatory costs, again driving up profits for his private oil company. Conclusion: the cozy relationship between Philip F. Anschutz and Justice Gorsuch far surpasses the standard of reasonably questioned impartiality for the federal recusal statute. This relationship that creates a conflict of interest is just the latest example of countless violations in the years-long Supreme Court ethics crisis. Lasting accountability and reform are needed to restore integrity back into the nation's highest court. Can you restore integrity into something that never had integrity? Just want to know. Anyway, it says, now is the time for action to ensure our court is held to the highest standards of ethics and impartiality. Our democracy depends on it. Thank you for your prompt attention to this request. Respectfully, Accountable.us, Action Together, NEPA, Clean Elections Texas, Common Defense.us, Courage California, Demcast USA, and Citizens United Action Fund, Free Speech for People, Greenpeace USA, Indivisible, Revolving Door Project, Stand Up America, Take Back the Court, and People Power United. So yeah, this is linked in the description of the video. Let this all marinate. So we're on round 2 of this bitch, and to be honest, besides reading what we're reading as I read it, like live processing here, I don't know shit about this case. You know what I'm saying? So we're processing now, and then next live stream I do on this, I'll pull up SCOTUS blog and any court records potentially that I can find about it, and we'll do like a deeper dive into the actual court case. But yeah, so this other article from Accountable.us says, Gorsuch's billionaire ties threaten Supreme Court integrity. In a letter to Chief Justice Roberts, Advocacy and Watchdog groups demand recusal in high-stakes NEPA case. And it says, today Accountable.us, along with over a dozen watchdog and accountability organizations, sent a letter to Chief Justice John Roberts demanding that Justice Neil Gorsuch recuse himself from the upcoming case, 7 County Infrastructure Coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado, due to his close ties with big oil billionaire Philip Anschutz, who stands to financially gain from the outcome of this case. This demand follows a virtual press briefing held last week, where advocacy leaders and members of Congress raised alarms about the ongoing ethical concerns plaguing the Supreme Court, emphasizing the urgency for reform. Oh, we can watch it. Ooh, hold up. Okay. We might have to watch this in another live stream. Whoops. My bad. I don't know what the fuck I just did. Life is hard. Anyway, I am going to save that for another live stream. The group sent a letter to Chief Justice Roberts urging Gorsuch's recusal, citing a significant conflict of interest as Anschutz stands to gain financially from the outcome of the case. The letter highlights Gorsuch's long-standing professional and personal relationship with Anschutz, including serving as outside counsel to Anschutz's companies, attending private retreats hosted by Anschutz, and co-investing in properties with Anschutz business associates. Anschutz companies stand to benefit significantly if the court weakens the National Environmental Policy Act, potentially stripping away crucial environmental regulations. The letter also notes that Anschutz's companies have acknowledged in a recent amicus brief that they stand to benefit from a rollback of NEPA, as it would reduce costs associated with environmental reviews and litigation for all of the company's development projects on public land. The coalition of organizations urges the Supreme Court to take immediate action to ensure Justice Gorsuch's recusal and restore public confidence in the judiciary. Yeah, I mean, it would be really hard to restore confidence in the public judiciary, but it's just the right fucking thing to do. Anyway, they have another article that says new. Accountable.us report uncovers conflict of interest between Justice Neil Gorsuch and billionaire Philip Anschutz in key environmental case. Let's see. This first paragraph seems to be a recap of what we just read. Oh, this is a new sentence here. Okay, to me. So, or at least I didn't process it before. It said the new research highlights Justice Gorsuch's financial connections and relationship to Anschutz, raising serious questions about Gorsuch's impartiality in the case. With the future of critical protections for workers, consumers, and the environment on the line in the 7-county infrastructure case, this conflict threatens to undermine public trust in the court's ability to deliver fair and impartial rulings. And then it's got 3 quotes here. It says from Caroline, I don't know how to say her last name. I think it's like Ciccone or something, Ciccone, I don't know. It says, and she's the accountable.us president. It says, when justices have personal and financial ties to billionaires who stand to gain from the decisions they make, the impartiality of the court is called into question. The American people deserve a legal system that isn't influenced by billionaires and corporate actors with special access. The stakes here couldn't be higher. Our environment, our communities, and the trust we place in our judicial system are all on the line. Justice Gorsuch must recuse from 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado, and restore some semblance of integrity back to our highest court. All right. Then Rep. Hank Johnson, ranking member of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Court, said, Americans are sick and tired of repeatedly learning that our Supreme Court justices, after being secretly wined and dined at luxury resorts by billionaires with monetary interests before the court, refuse to recuse from cases involving the interests of those same billionaires. It would be particularly galling should Justice Gorsuch refuse to recuse when the same billionaire who wined and dined him as a justice is also a former client of his. Americans deserve better, and it is time for Congress to take action and rein in this arrogant and unaccountable court. And then from Rep. Melanie Stansbury, it says, our Supreme Court has been captured and the American people are stuck dealing with the implications. These new revelations of influence on Justice Gorsuch by billionaire Philip Anschutz are deeply concerning because in the next few months, the Supreme Court will hear a case about environmental protections. Justice Gorsuch must recuse himself from that case. It is clear he won't be impartial after pressure from corporate greed and self-interest. And I believe we can say that it's clear he won't be impartial because the Chevron deference being overturned is an example of that in my opinion. Just my opinion personally. I do think that, when you take into consideration genocide and land back movement, it is kind of a joke to act like the government was ever ethical. But, I'm all about holding true to your word. So if these bitches ever actually honored their own fucking word one day, that would be fucking great. You know what the fuck I mean? Anyway. So, from Constitutional Accountability Center, the USConstitution.org, We have an article here said an oil giant railroads its SCOTUS connection to gut environmental law. And then it says, a fossil fuel giant with deep ties to Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, along with other powerful pro-business groups, are explicitly pressuring Gorsuch and his fellow justices to rule in favor of oil and gas interests in an upcoming Supreme Court case. If the High Court agrees, not only could it help authorize a controversial crude oil train running alongside a critical waterway, it could also invalidate the constitutionality of one of the country's preeminent environmental laws. Petitioners in the case, Seven County Infrastructure Coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado, are challenging an environmental review process that's holding up an 88-mile rail line project designed to transport crude oil just feet away from a fragile Colorado River tributary that 40 million people rely on, and where an oil spill could be catastrophic. And I apologize. I'm just thinking of, did y'all see this shit?
Wix. One platform.
About the ad.
Any website.
Why?
Unlimited creation.
And now we're taking you to Texas, where a burning natural gas pipeline east of Houston has left hundreds of people stuck inside the...
Okay, y'all see this? This pipeline just fucking burst. And, yeah. It set houses on fire and shit. A bunch of crazy ass shit happened. Like, bruh, yeah, I'll link this shit. I'll link this video and in description of this video later. But this shit is crazy. Like, I don't even, is this fire still burning? I never checked back on that. It was burning for like a long time. Then that's done now, right? Hopefully. But I don't know why. I just thought about that when you're like talking about catastrophic shit happening, and like people are like, like people act like they aren't warned. They weren't warned before when things like this happen. But I feel like, like people are trying to warn you, but you don't fucking listen. You know what I mean? I don't know, but that's just me. It's just me. Anyway, okay, so then it says the Anschutz Exploration Corporation, a Denver-based oil and gas company whose owner, Philip, oh, you know what? I'm sorry I'm like this. I'm sorry about how loud that fucking volume difference was too for you guys, because I didn't really plan that shit, and then I forgot how loud my fucking shit was, if that mattered for you guys, and then it was like, ah, fuck, and then I realized after I didn't even mute, so there could have been echo. That probably was not enjoyable. My bad. Anyway, so it said the Anschutz Exploration Corporation, a Denver-based oil and gas company whose owner, Philip Anschutz, helped get Gorsuch appointed to a 10th Circuit Court of Appeals position in 2006, is one of the largest oil producers in the region. The proposed rail line would serve. If approved, the rail line would be a boon for Anschutz's company. In addition to the case's existential stakes for the mega drought-stricken American Southwest, the court's ruling has the potential to be very precedential, said Kevin Manoli, former general counsel at the Environmental Protection Agency. Oh, it is Protection Agency. Okay. And current partner at Alston & Bird, a Washington, D.C. based corporate law firm. I would expect it to be a fairly large, very significant decision coming out of this case, Manoli told the Lever. I don't think the Supreme Court takes the case just to make a narrow ruling on the scope of agency authority. I think they're going to make a decision and make a pronouncement about the scope of authority and responsibility underneath agencies generally when they issue their opinion. Gorsuch is now facing calls from multiple federal lawmakers and Accountable.us, a government watchdog group that first exposed Anschutz's involvement in the case, to recuse himself from the matter due to his close ties to the oil tycoon. During his 11-year stint on the 10th Circuit, Gorsuch recused himself from dozens of cases related to Anschutz. Americans are sick and tired of repeatedly learning that our Supreme Court justices, after being secretly wined and dined at luxury resorts by billionaires with monetary interests before the court, refuse to recuse from cases involving the interests of those same billionaires, said Rep. Hank Johnson, ranking member of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Courts. It would be particularly galling should Justice Gorsuch refuse to recuse when the same billionaire who wined and dined him as a justice is also a former client of his. The Supreme Court did not respond to a request for comment on whether Gorsuch will recuse himself from the case. The ties between Anschutz and Gorsuch span nearly 3 decades, starting when Gorsuch served as outside counsel to Anschutz's businesses. Since his appointment to the Supreme Court, Gorsuch has given multiple speeches during Anschutz's annual dove hunting retreats in Colorado. According to a September 4th amicus brief that the Anschutz Exploration Corporation filed in support of the petitioners in the 7-county infrastructure case, the oil giant isn't simply interested in getting the rail line approved. It wants the Supreme Court to overhaul the country's environmental review process so the company can expand its operations. Because the National Environmental Policy Act applies to every major federal action, including the authorizations Anschutz needs to develop federal oil and gas reserves, far more is at stake in this case than the 88-mile rail line in rural Utah, the Anschutz Exploration Corporation wrote in its brief. Judging from the background of the other groups pushing to invalidate government regulations holding up the oil train, Anschutz isn't alone in thinking the case could have implications far beyond a single rail line. Several advocacy groups tied to the sprawling pro-business and anti-government political network founded by petrochemical magnates Charles and David, is it Coe or is it Koch? I don't know. Coe? K-O-C-H? Koch? Coach? Yeah. Also filed briefs in the case, as did an anti-conservation organization funded in part by the billion-dollar conservative dark money operation, helmed by political operative Leonard Leo. Other briefs came from the corporate lobbying groups, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Association of American Railroads, which has close ties to the oil and gas industry, and Energy Transfer LP, the company behind the controversial Dakota Access crude oil pipeline. The 7-county infrastructure case comes after a series of recent Supreme Court decisions that have dismantled environmental protections and government authority to the boon of the fossil fuel industry. In March 2023, the High Court rolled back provisions of the Clean Water Act and weakened the Environmental Protection Agency's authority over such matters. More recently, the Supreme Court issued a ruling in June that allows certain entities to challenge federal agencies' rules in federal court, which could have detrimental effects on environmental protections. Now, we have yet another case backed by yet another fossil fuel billionaire to undermine another court protection for our environment, our health, and our safety, and yet another MAGA justice with financial ties to big oil, says Doug Linder, a senior director at the environmental nonprofit League of Conservation Voters, during an Accountable.us press conference on the matter. The case threatens not just core environmental protections, but also the people's right to have a say in major decisions about their communities. The man behind the curtain. Anschutz 84, has a sprawling empire that extends far beyond oil and gas. The billionaire is the majority owner of the Los Angeles hockey team, owns the company that puts on the popular Coachella Music Festival in California, has a partial stake in the Los Angeles Galaxy soccer team, owns the Washington Examiner news outlet, and has business interests in railroads, real estate, and other industries. Anschutz has been called the Wizard of Oz of Los Angeles, given his reputation for settling business disputes behind closed doors with cash payments, his feigned reclusiveness, and his influence across the city's enterprises. Anschutz's relationship with Gorsuch dates back to 1995, when Gorsuch worked at a Washington, D.C.-based law firm that represented Anschutz's oil and gas company. In 2006, a lawyer representing Anschutz wrote a letter to George W. Bush's administration recommending that the White House appoint Gorsuch, then an assistant attorney general at the Justice Department, to a vacant 10th Circuit Court of Appeals position. Cannot speak again. And then it says, just a few months later, Gorsuch was confirmed to the court system that oversees cases in Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Utah, and Wyoming, bypassing 3 other individuals who were reportedly being considered for the job. In 2017, President Donald Trump appointed Gorsuch to the Supreme Court amid scrutiny over Gorsuch's rulings that favored business interests and dark money in politics. Since then, Gorsuch has faced multiple questions regarding his financial dealings, including his ties to Anschutz. Just 1 month after he was confirmed to the Supreme Court, Gorsuch, along with other co-owners, sold a vacation home to a lawyer employed at a firm that routinely argues cases before the High Court. When Gorsuch reported the sale into 2017 Supreme Court financial disclosure, he left the buyer's name blank, and it wasn't until 2023 that the buyer's identity became known. Earlier this year, Gorsuch ignored calls to recuse himself from another Supreme Court case due to his ties to Anschutz. That case, called Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, overturned a long-standing precedent called the Chevron deference that allowed federal agencies to interpret laws and issue rules based on them. Multiple legal groups that have received funding from Anschutz's foundations filed amicus briefs urging the court to overturn the Chevron deference, including the Mountain States Legal Foundation, the Pacific Legal Foundation, and the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. Not only would overturning Chevron deference strip power from federal agencies, harming their ability to serve everyday Americans, but now we know billionaire oil baron Philip Anschutz would score big from a favorable ruling by his friend on the High Court. I can't say this last name. Ciccone, someone from with accountable.us said at the time. Alright. And then it says, laying the tracks for an environmental disaster. The proposed 88-mile rail line at the heart of the 7-county infrastructure case has faced heated pushback from environmental groups and local residents, and, if approved, would quintuple oil production in Utah's, is it Uinta? I can't say this word, Uinta? Basin. The rail project, helmed by an inexperienced financial firm staffed by former government officials, would allow trains full of waxy crude oil to run along the banks of the Colorado River through steep canyons that are prone to mud and rock slides. Critics of the rail line say those hazards could trigger derailments, which could in turn contaminate water for millions of people downstream. The project could result in as many as 5 2-mile-long crude oil trains running over 100 miles directly alongside the headwaters of the Colorado River each day, wrote 3 Democratic Colorado lawmakers, Senator Michael Bennet, Senator John Hickenlooper, and Representative Joe Neguse. I don't think I'm saying any of this right. In a March 2023 letter to the Transportation Department. I feel so bad, y'all. I can't speak for shit today. Sorry for anything that was gibberish. Yes, it probably was. My bad. Whoops. Fuck. Shit. Then it says, the project has been put on hold pending an agency environmental review and court challenges. Last year, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit ruled that railroad regulators violated federal law by failing to analyze the rail line's potential impact on wildlife, the Colorado River, local residents, and other communities downstream, all the way to the Gulf Coast. That D.C. Circuit decision stripped the rail line's construction permit, leading an alliance of oil-producing Utah counties pushing the project called the 7-County Infrastructure Coalition to challenge the lower court ruling at the Supreme Court. The petitioners argued that the requested environmental impact study would be outside of regulators' authority and contrary to a previous Supreme Court ruling. If the Supreme Court agrees, its decisions could narrow the scope of federal agencies' ability to review the environmental impacts of certain major federal actions, as delineated by the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. Did they say NEPA? Like NEPA, baby? A 54-year law that has been called the Magna Carta of federal environmental laws. If you're a supporter of the NEPA analysis process, you should be very concerned about where the Supreme Court is likely to go in this case, said Manoli, the former Environmental Protection Agency lawyer. If the Supreme Court rules for the petitioners, it will likely narrow the scope of environmental effects that have to be considered under an NEPA view. Is it under a NEPA? I don't know. In its amicus brief, Anschutz's company is urging the Supreme Court to use its authority to strip environmental protections in order to expand domestic oil and gas production. The company claims that environmental regulations are endangering national security and risk eroding the country's competitive advantage in the global marketplace for energy, and can alter global geopolitics, reducing the energy security of the U.S. and its allies by forcing dependence on foreign and often politically and economically unfavorable sources. A sprawling conservative legal network. The petitioners in the 7-county infrastructure case are also backed by a bevy of amicus briefs from organizations known for working to gut government protections, expand corporate freedoms, and dismantle campaign finance laws designed to prevent regulatory capture. That includes, shit, is this cock? Why do I just want to say that word apparently? That includes the Koch-backed Americans for Prosperity Foundation and the Competitive Enterprise Institute, which filed a joint brief urging the Supreme Court to rein in federal agencies that overstep their authority by substituting their policy preferences for those mandated by Congress in the law. These groups also want the High Court to narrow the scope of key environmental protection laws, such as an EPA, and roll back the authority of government agencies. The problem is that the Council on Environmental Quality does not have and never has had any authority to issue binding NEPA regulations, the groups wrote. Instead, its charge is to serve a purely advisory function and make policy recommendations. In 2023, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Americans for Prosperity, and other co-backed groups helped derail federal railroad legislation that was introduced in the wake of a disastrous derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Another amicus brief came from the Property and Environmental Research Center, a think tank that has advocated for privatizing federal lands and rolling back endangered species protections under the guise of free market environmentalism. In 2022, the think tank received $200,000 from a dark money organization tied to Leo, the conservative political operative who helped orchestrate the Supreme Court's current far-right majority. The Property and Environmental Research Center's amicus brief in the 7-county infrastructure case claims that more stringent environmental reviews are not an unqualified good but can come at a significant environmental cost. The National Association of Manufacturers, a trade group representing 14,000 companies in a wide range of sectors, also filed an amicus brief in the case claiming that environmental reviews and unchecked litigation are threatening the U.S. economy and hurting Americans' ability to afford homes. The American Petroleum Institute, another group, and another pro-business organizations also signed on to the trade group's brief. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a pro-business trade group that spends more on lobbying than any other organization in the country, issued a similar brief. Put simply, America will struggle to meet its energy and infrastructure goals if each environmental review must be expanded to assess every potential environmental impact from every potential actor that might be averted if the government simply refused to act, the Chamber and others wrote. The National Association of Manufacturers and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce have worked together for more than 50 years to gut campaign finance laws and allow more corporate control of the government. According to a study by the Constitutional Accountability Center, a think tank focused on combating special interests, the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the Chamber of Commerce interests 70% of the time since the mid-2000s. Project 2025, the far-right anti-government plan for a second Trump presidency, funded by corporate interests, including Leo and groups, call for streamlining national environmental policy reviews and establishing discipline and accountability in the environmental review and permitting process for infrastructure projects. With so much at stake in the 7-county infrastructure case and other recent rulings, watchdogs say the connections between Supreme Court justices and those who stand to gain from these decisions can't be overlooked. When justices have personal and financial ties to billionaires who stand to gain from the decisions they make, the impartiality of the court is called into question. The American people deserve a legal system that isn't influenced by billionaires and corporate actors with special access. And this is from the person whose name I can't pronounce with accountable.us. So yeah, letting that all marinate. Basically, we're getting more details here on the specifics about how this can particularly be an environmental disaster, specifically in Utah regarding the railroad triggering derailments and other hazards and things like that. And then other than that, it's gone into more about Anschutz, more about the entire policy and all of that. I feel like it's a really good read. So yeah, fucking Um, Last but not least, on Neil Gorsuch and Philip Anschutz today, I've got an article from westword.com, and it says Supreme Court Justice faces recusal calls over ties to Colorado's richest man. Neil Gorsuch is once again facing public scrutiny for his relationship with billionaire Philip Anschutz. And then it says, United States Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch is once again facing public scrutiny for his relationship. Okay, I just read that. With Colorado billionaire Philip Anschutz. Critics hosted a press call on Thursday, October 3rd, demanding that Gorsuch recuse himself from an upcoming Supreme Court case they say presents a conflict of interest because of his ties to Anschutz. The 7-County Infrastructure Coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado case will determine whether federal agencies must consider indirect and cumulative environmental impacts when reviewing proposed projects such as oil and gas drilling operations. Anschutz's oil and gas company, Anschutz Exploration, filed an amicus brief in the case, arguing that the National Environmental Policy Act does not require agencies to consider environmental impacts beyond their jurisdiction. The brief said broader reviews lead to absurd requirements and significant harms to project developers like Anschutz Exploration. If Justice Gorsuch hears this case, it really puts the entire system into question, said Caroline Ciccone, I don't know how to say the name, president of the Watchdog group Accountable.us, during Thursday's meeting. Americans should have full confidence in the impartiality of the justices who are hearing this case. We cannot have that confidence when Justice Gorsuch has not recused himself. The Denver-born justices relationship with Colorado's richest man has been well documented since Gorsuch was appointed to the nation's highest court by former President Donald Trump in 2017. That year, the New York Times reported that Gorsuch previously represented Anschutz and his companies as an outside counsel, and that Anschutz lobbied the Bush administration to nominate Gorsuch to the Federal Appeals Court. Gorsuch often attended and spoke at Anschutz's annual dove hunting retreats. According to the Times, and Gorsuch owned a vacation home property with 2 of Anschutz's top business lieutenants. Because of these personal links to Anschutz, Accountable US unsuccessfully urged Gorsuch to recuse himself from Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo earlier this year, noting the case's impacts on shaping the implementation of environmental protection and energy policy that would affect the operations of Anschutz's oil business. This kind of conflict wouldn't exist anywhere else in American life, not between a reporter and a source, a judge and a suspect, or in a private business. So, is it Ciccone or Ciccone said? Who knows? There's no doubt that there should be some separation here. Unfortunately, as we have seen in the past few years, the Supreme Court has proven that they are unwilling to follow those set of rules that everyone else lives by. Representatives for Gorsuch and Anschutz did not respond to requests for comment from Westword. Gorsuch has disqualified himself from Anschutz-adjacent cases in the past. During his time as a judge for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, he recused himself from a 2011 case involving the Anschutz Company. The judgment upheld a tax court decision to hold the company responsible for substantial income tax deficiencies. According to Accountable.us's count, he made similar recusals in 44 cases involving Anschutz's companies or investments before entering the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's Code of Conduct specifies that justices are not required to disqualify themselves over the filing of an amicus brief, which Anschutz's Exploration filed in this latest case. But critics argue that Gorsuch's relationship violates the Code's other guideline, that justices should recuse themselves when their impartiality might be reasonably questioned. We have all gotten quite an education in the last couple of years about how shockingly, comically, tragically low The ethical standards on the highest court of the land are, said Doug Linder of the League of Conservation Voters, an environmental advocacy group. Now we have yet another case, backed by yet another fossil fuel billionaire, to undermine yet another core protection for our environment, our health, and our safety, and yet another MAGA justice with financial ties to big oil. Thursday's call for Gorsuch's recusal also featured Democratic Congressman Hank Johnson of Georgia, who described the current Supreme Court as unaccountable, arrogant, reckless, and out of control. It's sad that we have reached this point where we have a United States Supreme Court that is thoroughly corrupted by money. Johnson said, they rule in favor of the special interests who have wined and dined them. That's what we have coming up with this 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado case. Leaders of Accountable.us say they have not received any responses from Gorsuch or the court about his recusal. 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado is scheduled to be argued before the Supreme Court during the 2024-2025 term, which begins on Monday, October 7th. And this was written by Hannah Metzger. I can't say this name, but this was written by a bitch named Hannah. Anyway, yeah, so this shit, we're gonna cover that shit. And yeah, it's just wild to me because, this gives us more details in terms of other opinions regarding the situation, like a few quotes that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise regarding the absurd requirements, significant harms, which is a joke considering how much money they make, as well as about the conflicts of interest here, extra quote from them there. Yeah, so, and about how, it's a shitty ass, it's an example of how shitty the court can be. But I really feel like where people are acting like this is the worst the court has ever been is failing to address or is kind of minimize, or maybe it's not, but I feel like it could be minimizing past atrocities. Like as if there was ever really that ethical, you know what I mean? But that's just me. Alrighty, so now what we're going to do is move on to the how to start a startup thing. So I'm going to play a 15-second ad real quick, and then we are going to check that out. Okay, so next up, what I want to check out here, I have this Lecture 2 Team and Execution from Sam Altman regarding the How to Start a Startup playlist. So there's like the Y Combinator, where it says Y Combinator here, I have this playlist that they've posted linked in the description of the video, as well as my personal playlist where I'm reacting to this playlist. Both are linked in the description of this video. Any of my links in the description of this video may get moved to the comments if I need to, depending on what I need to do with timestamps, by the way. Alright, so we're going to start this off. I feel like 2 times is typically too high for me. So we're going to go at 1.75 speed. And then if it's slow enough, I might bump it up. But we're going to start at 1.75 speed. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of like a live reaction to this lecture here on execution from Stanford. And the reason I'm doing this also is just to kind of get us thinking about, well, first of all, for other people to think about how they want to build their own business, if that's what you're doing, or how, what type of business you want to work for, and for me, it's also to reflect on what are things that I was watching about 10 years ago to begin building my business? Um, and fucking, how do I feel about that shit now? Like, do I still, because I've always had some critiques about a lot of things that were said, but also a lot of that was very valuable. So we're rewatching the whole playlist. But yeah, all right, here we go.
Before I jump into today's lecture, I wanted to answer a few questions. People emailed me saying they had questions about the last lecture they ran out of time for. So if you have a question about what we covered last time, I'm welcome to answer it now, starting with you. It should be on. Can you not hear me? No? Maybe you can ask them to turn it on? Hopefully it'll come on. Anybody else? Yes?
So one question that was submitted online was, how do I identify the market has a fast growth rate now and also for the next 10 years?
All right, so the question is how you identify markets that are growing quickly. The good news about this is one of the big advantages students have. You should just trust your instincts on this. Older people have to basically guess about the technologies that are sort of that young people are using, right? Because young people get older and they become the dominant market. But you can just watch what you're doing and what your friends are doing. And you will almost certainly have better instincts on fast-growing markets than anybody older than you. And so the answer to this is just trust your instincts. Think about what you're using more. Think about what you're using, what you're seeing people your age begin to start using. That will almost certainly be the future. Maybe I can do one more question on the last lecture before we start.
And if you want to check how a market is currently trending in the industry, you can also always use Google Trend Reports and other tools like that to see how are specific markets, what are the trend history regarding that market. Now, if it's something that is entirely new to the world altogether with like something new that you're adding to a specific market or a new market itself, then you may not have that history to look back on. But if you're thinking about whether or not to get into a market altogether, or if a market is trending or going to be trending in the future, then you can check trend reports too in terms of factoring that into what else you know about the market in terms of predicting is what I would recommend. And the Raylee playlist has some shit about trends in there, and then I will try to remember to link my forecasting trends playlist as well in the description or comments.
This isn't the last lecture, but another question online is, how do you deal with burnout while still being effective and remaining productive?
Yeah, sure. So the question is how you deal with burnout as a founder. The answer to this is just that it sucks and you keep going. Unlike a student, where you can sort of like throw up your hands and say, you know what, I'm really burned out, I'm just gonna like get bad grades this quarter. One of the hard parts.
Okay, I feel like this one right here is where I know I said I wasn't going to try to talk about Madeline Pendleton today, but this one really does touch on some thoughts that I had about that situation, and that playlist is linked in the description of this video. But I feel like Madeline Pendleton is burning out as a business owner and is putting expectations onto her fucking workers without necessarily being able to fully compensate them for taking role of responsibility in terms of managing the business, in my opinion, where like she's just not fully doing her job as a CEO because she would rather be doing other things, in my opinion. And so, but that's just my opinion based on the text messages I read and the tweets I saw. But yeah, fucking, so the feast and famine cycle is also something else that's coming to mind. One of the biggest reasons a lot of business owners struggle with time management is going through the feast and famine cycle of business, where we are doing all this work to generate leads. We finally get leads, then we spend all of this work working on the leads, and then we have to do it all over again, right? And so having some sustainability and some scheduling there. And then there's also like but no matter what, say you could have everything in place. One difference between being an owner of a business versus even being like a manager or something, where you can, there's like, based on your contract, there's like a time period. Well, maybe not if you're a manager, depending on the manager owner arrangement, because some owners will go hire a manager so they don't have to do this part of ownership, right? So you either do this yourself as an owner until you can hire a manager, or you get a manager to do it for you, or you just keep doing it for yourself as an owner if you want to, but fucking like you still have to, even if you're not working 24/7 a day, your business still exists 24/7 hours a day. Shit goes wrong 24/7 hours a day. So you're like always on call, so to speak, you know? And so when you try to create routines or schedules or plans for yourself, you may still have to readjust your schedule because, you know, say you get a new lead, you get to choose between overseeing the resources to close this new lead or taking that day off. You know what I'm saying? Things like that. And so you got to have someone to manage your business for you. Or say you're running an ad for a client and um, there something goes wrong, and say that there is a, you know, a policy guideline update with you sell underwear, and there is a policy guideline update with how much body you're allowed to show with underwear. And so you were previously showing more sexy underwear in the ads, but now that's against guidelines. So now all of a sudden you got a strike against your account and all these things, you know, things like that, or you have to go rush to fix certain issues, like emergencies happen, right? And so when it's not your job to deal with that emergency, you get to check out and go do your job. But when you're the business owner, it's always your job to, even if you don't do the actual thing, or if you're like a CEO, it's still your job to make sure it's done, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? All right.
It's about running a startup is that it's real life, and you just have to get through it. The canonical advice is like go on vacation or whatever. That never works for founders. It's sort of all-consuming in this way. It's very difficult to understand. So what you do is you just keep going. You rely on people. It's like really important, and founder depression is a serious thing, and you need to have a support network. But the way through burnout is just to address the challenges, address the things that are going wrong, and you'll eventually feel better. All right. So last lecture we covered the idea and the product. And I want to just emphasize again that if you don't get those right, none of the rest of this is going to save you. Today, we're going to talk about how to hire and how to execute. Hopefully you don't execute the people you hire. Sometimes. So first, I want to talk about co-founders. Co-founder relationships are among the most important in the entire company. And everyone says that you need to watch out for tension brewing among co-founders and address it immediately, and that's all true. And certainly in YC's case, the #1 cause of early death for startups is co-founder blowups. But for some reason, a lot of people treat choosing their co-founder with even less importance than they put on hiring. Don't do this. This is one of the most important decisions you make in the life of your startup, and you need to treat it as such. And for some reason, students are really bad at this. They just pick someone. They're like, I want to start a business. You want to start a business? Let's start a startup together. There are these like co-founder dating things where you're like, hey, I'm looking for a co-founder. We don't really know each other. Let's start a company. And this is like crazy. You would never hire someone like this. And yet people are willing to choose their business partners this way. It's really, really bad. And choosing a random co-founder or choosing someone you don't have a long history with, choosing someone that you're not friends with so that when things are really going wrong, you have this sort of past history to bind you together, usually ends up in disaster.
Right, and I feel like he's probably about to get to this, but another thing that I see people do all the time is get into business with other people and not have some sort of contract or agreement regarding it. And in some cases that works out because for some people it does make it easier to just, you know what, we didn't sign shit, let's just run away. We don't fucking like each other, fuck it, fuck you. You know what I mean? You can just run away, walk away, there's nothing to deal with, right? But then in other cases, that will bite you in the ass because you will invest so much resource into the company, and if you didn't sign the paperwork and so has ownership or possession of certain things, you know, like for example, I knew 2 DJs that were co-producing an event company together, and they did online events and they did physical events. And one day they got into a fight, and one of them changed all the passwords on all their social media accounts, all of the channels, everything. And they had built that brand together. And in fact, the dude who got knocked out, it was his idea for the whole fucking name and concept. But the other dude who locked him out stole that shit out from under him, still performing to this day under all of that. And this other dude, it was all his idea. He's got no credit for it now. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like everybody that knows them from that time knows this. Everybody knows what the truth is. Like that dude's shady as fuck. He just stole that shit. That's actually this shit. But the reason that no one cares is because that dude also sucks ass. So everybody's like, fuck you too. You know what I mean? But that's not the point. But my point is contracts, like know who you're going into business with. And even then, good luck. But a lot of people, if you're going to go into business with somebody, like they skip the step of having things in writing, or if like there was some business agreement, that dude, even if he had decided he wanted to be petty for a time and lock him out for a time or whatever, legally there would have been some recourse, right? But because there was no paperwork and it's just like two dudes arguing over that, they're just like, I have to go court over it. Like, no, there's not gonna be like, and then you'd have to have money, and there's not much you can do. You know what I mean? There's no defense for that. Like, there's nothing in writing to verify that you should have owned it. You know what I mean? I don't know. But yeah, so, muy importante. Yeah, my bad.
We had one YC batch where 9 of about 75 companies added on a random co-founder between when we interviewed the companies and when they started, and all 9 of those teams fell apart the next year. The track record for founders that don't already know each other is really bad. A good way to meet a co-founder is in college. If you're not in college and you don't know a co-founder, the next best thing I think is to go work in an interesting company. If you work at Facebook or Google or something like that, it's probably almost as co-founder rich as Stanford. It's better to have no co-founder than to have a bad co-founder, but it's still bad to be a solo founder. I was just looking at the stats here before we started. For the top, I may have missed one because I was counting quickly, but I think that for the top 20 most valuable YC companies, all of them have at least 2 founders. And we probably fund at a rate of something like 1 out of 10 solo teams. So best of all, founder you know, co-founder you know. Better than that, or not as good as that, but still okay. Solo founder, random founder you meet. Again, students do this for some reason. Really, really bad. So as you're thinking about co-founders and people that could be good, there's a question of what you're looking for, right? And at YC we have this public phrase, and it's relentlessly resourceful. Everyone's heard of that. And I think that really is a very good description for what you're looking for with co-founders. You definitely need relentlessly resourceful co-founders. But there's a more colorful example that we share at the YC kickoff. Paul Graham started using this, and I've kept it going. So you're looking for co-founders that need to be unflappable, tough, they know what to do in every situation, they act quickly, they're decisive, they're creative, they're ready for anything. And it turns out that there's a model for this in pop culture. And it sounds really dumb, but it's at least very memorable. And we've told every class of YC this for a long time. And I think it helps them. And that model is James Bond. And again, this sounds crazy, but it will at least stick in your memory. And you need someone that behaves like James Bond more than you need someone that is an expert in some particular domain. As I mentioned earlier, you really want to know your co-founders for a while, ideally years. This is true for early hires as well, but incidentally, more people get this right for early hires than they do for co-founders. So again, take advantage of school. In addition to relentlessly resourceful, you want a tough and a calm co-founder. There are all the obvious things like smart, but everyone knows that you want a smart co-founder. Most people don't prioritize tough and calm well enough.
I'm over here distracted by the scenes, but by the way, I am noting the ableist vernacular with usage of words like dumb and crazy. I'm not cool with that. I'm noting it. I'm thinking to link my ableist language video, if I can remember to, in the description of this video as well. But yeah, all right.
Especially if you feel like you yourself aren't, you need a co-founder who is. If you're not technical, and hopefully most people in this room are, you really want a technical co-founder. There's this weird thing going on in startups right now where it's become popular to say, like, you know what, we don't need technical founders, we're going to hire people, we're just going to be great managers. That doesn't work too well in our experience. Software people really should be starting software companies. Media people should be starting media companies. So in the YC experience, 2 or 3 co-founders seems to be about perfect. 1, obviously not great, 5 really bad, 4 works sometimes, but 2 or 3 I think is what to target. Okay, the second part of how to hire, try not to. So one of the weird things that you'll notice if you start a company is that everyone asks you how many employees you have. And this is the metric people use to sort of judge how real your startup is and how cool you are. And if you say you have a high number of employees, they're really impressed. And if you say you have a low number of employees, then you sound like sort of this little joke. But actually it sucks to have a lot of employees, and you should be proud of how few employees you can have. Lots of employees ends up with things like a high burn rate, means you're losing a lot of money every month, complexity, tension, slow decision making. The list goes on, but it's nothing good. So you want to be proud of how much you can get done with a small number of employees. Many of the best YC companies have had phenomenally small number of employees for the first year, sometimes none besides the founders. They really try to stay small as long as they possibly can. At the beginning, you should only hire when you have a desperate need to. Later, you need to learn how to hire fast and scale up the company. But in the early days, the goal should be not to hire, not to hire. And one of the reasons this is so bad is that the cost of getting an early hire wrong is really high. In fact, a lot of the companies that I've been very involved with that have had a very bad first hire in the first 3 or so employees never recover from it. It just kills the company. Airbnb spent 5 months interviewing their first employee before they hired someone. And in their first year, they only hired 2 people. Before they hired a single person, they wrote down a list of the cultural values that they wanted any Airbnb employee to have. One of those was that you had to bleed Airbnb. And if you didn't sort of agree to that, they just wouldn't hire you. As an example of how intense Brian Chesky is, he's the Airbnb CEO, he used to ask people before he hired them at Airbnb if they would take the job if they got a medical diagnosis that they had 1 year left to live. He wanted them to be that committed. Later, he decided that was like a little bit too crazy. And I think he relaxed it to 10 years. But last I heard, he still asks that question. But these hires really matter. These people are what go on to define your company. And so you need people They believe in it almost as much as you do. And it sounds like a crazy thing to ask, but he's gotten this culture of extremely dedicated people that come together when a company faces a crisis. And when a company faced a big crisis early on, everyone in the company lived in the office, and they shipped product every day until the crisis was over. One of the remarkable observations about Airbnb is if you talk to any of the first, say, I don't know, 40 or 50 employees, they all feel like they're a part of the founding of the company. And this is really hard to get right, and this is really rare. But by having an extremely high bar and hiring slowly and making sure everyone believes in the mission, you can get that. Okay, so let's say you've listened to the warning about not hiring, and now you absolutely have to. When you're in this hiring mode, your job is, it should be your number one priority to get the best people. Just like when you're in product mode, that's your number one priority. And when you're in fundraising mode, fundraising is your number one priority. One thing that founders always underestimate is how hard it is to recruit. You think you have this great idea, everyone's going to kind of join. But that's not how it works. To get the very best people, they have a lot of great options, right? And so it can easily take a year to recruit someone. It's this long process, and you have to convince them that your mission is the most important of anything that they're looking at. This is another case of why it's really important to get the product right before anything else. The best people know that they should join a rocket ship. By the way, that's my number one piece of advice. If you're going to join a startup, pick a rocket ship. Pick a company that's already working, and that not everyone yet realizes that, but it's because you're paying attention, it's going to be huge. And again, you can usually identify these. But good people know this, right? And so good people will wait, and they want to see that you're on this breakout trajectory before they join. One question that people asked online this morning is how much time you should be spending hiring. The answer is either like 0 or 25%. You're either not hiring at all, or it's probably your single biggest block of time. In practice, like all these books on management or whatever say that you should spend 50% of your time hiring, but the people that give that advice, it's rare for them to even spend 10% themselves. 25% is still a huge amount of time, but that's really how much you should be doing once you're in hiring mode. Okay, so if you compromise and hire someone mediocre, you will always regret it. We always like to warn founders of this. No one really feels it until they make the mistake the first time, but it can poison the culture. Mediocre people at a big company cause some problems. They don't usually kill the company. A single mediocre hire in the first 5 will often, in fact, kill a startup. A friend of mine has a sign up in the conference room that he uses for interviews, and he positions the sign so the candidate is looking at it while they're interviewing, and it says that mediocre engineers do not build great companies. Yeah, that's true. It's really true. You can get away with it in a big company, right? Because people just sort of like fall through the cracks. But every person in a startup sets the tone. So if you compromise in the first, say 5, 10 hires, it might kill the company. And you should think about that for everyone you hire. Like, will I bet the future of this company on this single hire? And that's a tough bar. At some point in life of the company, when you're bigger, you will compromise on a hire. There will be some pressing deadline or something like that. You will still regret it. But
So I remember whenever I was first watching all of this, I was just kind of over here just thinking like, well, can't anybody be trained? So on one level, like, what do they mean by this expectation? Like people being experts off the bat, or as a startup, you got to really have a budget to, expect people at a certain caliber right off the bat. A lot of startups take people who are just starting up too because that's what they can afford, right? Or I had some mixed feelings the first time I ever saw this, but watching it now after having worked with people and actually, because when I first saw it, like, I had managed people before because I had been in like management roles at other companies, but I hadn't ever and I'd hired artists to perform at events, and I'd put on events and done all of that and hired people for that, but I hadn't hired people to work with me at a marketing agency, and so until later, and so now I have. So like whenever I was hiring people for events, that was super easy because I was hiring people who I had already predetermined that I enjoyed the quality of their content, and so I knew exactly what I was getting, and I got that. You know what I mean? But when it came to hiring people to work with me in marketing, that was like totally different because fucking basically I was getting this notification about my shit buffering. I don't really know how to fix it. I need to figure out how to fix it. I'm gonna troubleshoot that. My bad. Anyway, I got distracted by that notification. Okay, sorry. But when it came to hiring people to actually fucking work with me, I was having people like lie on their resumes about how much they know and things like that. And because obviously I know enough about marketing to just ask them questions and then figure out like I know the truth, and you can tell too when sometimes you can tell when someone's literally just doesn't know and they're just acting like they know, versus like when someone made a mistake, or misspoke. But yeah, it's the way people don't know the things that they should. So I do feel that it is important to vet people, because if you just hire anybody for a position, you may not necessarily always be getting someone who's being upfront with you about their skill set. But yeah, I don't know, man. I have mixed feelings still about the concept of like judging people on premise, though. Like, given that they have the the qualifications, the education to be at where it needs to be for the position, depending on the position. Um, I do feel like, as long as someone's being upfront with you, I feel like it's a real, like, I don't like this whole concept of where we decide one person is more qualified than another. I don't know. I mean, I guess in some levels it is, but in sometimes I feel like when it comes to hiring, like, I don't know. I'm talking in loopholes. I'm not making sense. I'm sorry. But yeah, I was just saying, I feel like there are situations in which people need to train more. You know what I mean? All right, leaving it at that.
This is the difference between theory and practice. And we're going to have later speakers talk about what to do when this happens. But in the early days, you just can't screw it up. Sources of candidates. This is another thing that students get wrong a lot. The best source by far for hiring is people that you already know, and people that other employees in the company already know. Most great companies in tech have been built by personal referrals for the first at least 100 employees, and often many more. Most founders feel awkward about calling everyone good that they've ever met and asking their employees to do the same. But you'll notice that if you go work at Facebook or Google, one of the things they do in your first few weeks is an HR person sits you down and like beats out of you every smart person you've ever met, no matter how likely you think you are to be able to recruit them. And these personal referrals really are the trick to hiring. So you have to like go way beyond your comfort zone here. Another tip is to look outside the valley. It is brutally competitive to hire engineers here, but you probably know very good people living elsewhere in the world that would love to work with you. Another question that founders ask us a lot about is experience and how much that matters. The short version here is that experience matters for some roles and not others. When you're hiring sort of like someone that is going to run a large organization of your company, experience probably matters a lot. For most of the early hires you make in a startup, experience doesn't matter very much, and you should go for aptitude and believe in what you're doing. Most of the best hires that I've ever made in my entire life have never done that thing before. So it's really worth thinking, like, is this a role where I care about experience or not? Most of the time you don't in the early days. There are three things that I look for when I hire people. Are they smart? Do they get things done? Do I want to spend a lot of time around them? And if I didn't answer, if I ended up with a yes for all three of these, I almost never regretted the hire. It's almost always worked out. You can learn a lot about all three of these things from an interview, but the very best way is by working together. So ideally, it's someone you've worked with in the past, and in which case you probably don't even need an interview. If you haven't, then I think it's way better to work with someone on a quick project for a day or two before hiring them. You'll both learn a lot. They will too. And most first-time founders are very bad interviewers, but very good at evaluating someone after they've worked together. So one of the pieces of advice that we give at YC is try to work together on a project rather than just doing an interview. If you are going to interview, which you'll probably do as well, you should ask specifically about projects that someone has done in the past. You'll learn a lot more than you will with brain teasers. For some reason, young technical founders love to ask brain teaser questions rather than just ask what someone's done. Really dig into projects people have worked on. And call references. That is another thing that first-time founders like to skip. You want to call some people that these people have worked with in the past. And when you do, you don't just want to ask, like, oh, how was so-and-so? Like, you really want to dig in. Like, is this person in the top 5% of people you've ever worked with? What specifically did they do? Would you hire them?
I don't know. Some of these questions like are really good theoretically, but I would look into your state laws on what you're allowed to ask, because I feel like that can potentially differ. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I didn't know you could. I feel like I was told, I don't know why I feel this way, but why do I think that you're supposed to only be able to ask like specific things? I don't know. But this was also 10 years ago. Like, laws could have changed.
Them again. Like, why aren't you trying to hire them again? You really have to press on these reference calls. Another thing that I've noticed from talking to a lot of YC companies is that good communication skills tend to correlate really well with hires that work out. I used to not pay attention to this. We're going to talk more about why communication is so important in an early startup. If someone is difficult to talk to, if someone cannot communicate clearly, it's a real problem in terms of their likelihood to work out. Also, for early employees, you want people that have somewhat of a risk-taking attitude. You generally get this, or they wouldn't be interested in a startup, but now that startups are sort of more in fashion. You want people that actually sort of like a little bit of risk. If someone's choosing between like McKinsey and joining your startup, very unlikely that person's going to work out at the startup. You also want people who are maniacally determined, and that is slightly different than having a risk-tolerant attitude. So you really should be looking for both. By the way, people are welcome to interrupt me with questions as stuff comes up. There's a famous test from Paul Graham called the animal test. And the idea here is that you should be able to describe any employee as an animal at what they do. And I don't think that probably translates out of English very well, but you need unstoppable people. You want people that are just going to get it done. Founders that end up being really happy with their early hires usually end up describing these people as the very best in the world at whatever they do. Mark Zuckerberg once said that he tries to hire people that A, he would spend time with socially, and B, that he'd be comfortable reporting to if the roles were reversed. This strikes me as a very good framework. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but you should at least enjoy working with them. And if you can't have that, you need to at least deeply respect them. But again, if you don't want to spend a lot of time around people, you should sort of trust your instincts on that. While I'm on this topic of hiring, I want to talk about employee equity. Founders screw this up all the time. I think that as a rough guideline, you should aim to give 10% of the company to the first 10 employees. They have to earn it over 4 years anyway. And if they're successful, they're going to contribute way more than that. They're going to increase the value of the company by way more than that. And if not, then they won't be around anyway. So for whatever reason, founders are usually very stingy with equity to employees and very generous with equity to investors. And I think this is totally backwards. I think this is one of the things that founders screw up the most often. Employees will only add more value over time. Investors sort of like write the check, and then despite a lot of big promises, don't usually do that much. Sometimes they do. But your employees are really.
I think this is great advice if you're going to be, depending on how your business is set up and expanding. If you're so entrepreneurship, then you can't really give people equity in yourself. But once you're incorporating, I think this is a great advice.
Really the ones that build the company over years and years. So I believe in like fighting with investors to reduce the amount of equity they get, and then being as generous as you possibly can with employees. The YC companies that have done this well, the YC companies that have been super generous with equity to early employees, in general, are the most successful ones that we funded. All right. So one thing that founders forget is that after they hire employees, they have to retain them. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here because we're going to have a full lecture on this later. But I do want to talk about it a little bit because founders get this wrong so often. You have to make sure that your employees are happy and feel valued. This is one of the reasons that big equity grants are important. People in the excitement of joining a startup don't think about it much, but as they come in day after day, year after year, if they feel like they've been treated unfairly, that will really start to grate on them, and resentment will build. But more than that, learning just a little bit of management skill, which first-time CEOs are usually terrible at, goes a long way. One of the speakers at YC this summer, who is now extremely successful but struggled early on and had his team turn over a few times, someone asked him what his biggest learning was, and he said that it turns out you shouldn't tell your employees they're fucking up every day unless you'd like them all to leave, because they will. But as a founder, this is this like very natural instinct, right? You think you can do everything the best, and it's easy to tell people when they're not doing it well. So learning just a little bit here will prevent this like massive team churn. It also doesn't come naturally to most founders to really praise their team. It took me a while to learn this too. You have to let your team get all the credit for everything good that happens, and you take responsibility for the bad stuff. You have to not micromanage. You have to like continually give people new areas of responsibility. These are not the things that most founders think about. I think the best thing you can do is be aware that as a first-time founder, you are like.
And okay, so by the whole credit thing, like, I mean, don't give people credit for shit they didn't do, but obviously, like, if someone worked on something and the client is happy, then give people credit. You know what I'm saying? That's where it is. Like, you don't just say, yeah, I'm so glad my team or my company did good. You say, yes, this person did that work. You know what I mean? Like, you assign the credit, because either way, they're going to be happy with your company and business. You're already getting credit, but what it does is it shows your people that you value them. It maintains that relationship. It builds their career, and it doesn't make people feel like you're trying to make it so they can't be successful. You know what I mean? And then with the morale thing, like, obviously, you know how you decide to. It can sometimes, there are times where it can be good to do, you know, depending on how you correct or call it out. Sometimes, depending on the situation, if it happened in public, and it might be good to address it in public, but then if others don't need to know about it, then they don't need to know about it. You know, for me, depending on the situation, or sometimes if like it's a situation I might not even have to tell anybody, you know. But it's just like depends, right? You because you can't really act like something didn't happen if everybody knows it did, right? But I do feel that, so it's not that there's anything wrong with necessarily having space for discussions with things that need to be fixed, but there is something to be said about if that's all you ever have to say, then it's not them, it's you. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, fucking making people feel valued, like, in terms of awarding them and rewarding them for what they are doing is super important, in my opinion. And it just, like, not only does it make people feel valued to know that, like, you want to acknowledge the good shit that they're doing, but it helps their career long time be able to look at these credentials that they then get, you know?
Likely to be a very bad manager and try to overcompensate for that. Dan Pink talks about these three things that motivate people to do great work: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I never thought about that when I was running my company, but I've thought about it since. And I think that's actually right, and I think it's worth trying to think about that. It also took me a while to learn to do things like one-on-ones and give clear feedback. All of these things that first-time CEOs just don't do until they get burned a few times. But maybe I can save you from doing that. All right, and the last part.
Oh, and the part where he was talking about the just not working with people you don't like or whatever. doesn't that make you be like, oh shit, the people who fired you, they just didn't like you? You know, just kidding, just me. Okay.
On the team section is about firing people when it's not working. No matter what I say here, this is not going to prevent anyone from doing it wrong. And the reason is that firing people is one of the worst parts of running a company. Actually, in my own experience, I think it is the worst. Every first-time founder waits too long. Everyone hopes that an employee will turn around. But the right answer is to fire fast when it's not working out. It's better for the company. It's also better for the employee. But it's so painful and so awful that everyone gets it wrong the first few times. In addition to firing people who are doing bad at their job, you also want to fire people who A, create an office politics, and B, who are persistently negative. The rest of the company is always aware of employees doing things like this, and it's just this huge drag. It's completely toxic to the company. Again, this is an example of something that might work okay in a big company, although I'm still skeptical, but will kill a startup. So I think you need to watch out for people that are, yes?
How do you balance actual fast and making other employees feel like they're secure even if they screw up sometimes? You want them to feel like they're out the door.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, how do you balance firing people fast and making early employees feel secure? The answer is when an employee is not working, it's not like they screw up once or twice. Anyone will screw up once or twice, or more times than that. And you should be like very loving, not take it out on them, like be a team, work together. If someone is getting every decision wrong, that's when you need to act. And at that point, it'll be.
Yeah, if you're known for having people rotate in multiple positions between 2 weeks and a few months, or maybe half a year tops, that's when you have like a situation when you're known for like churning and burning employees out and being like a mill. You know what I mean? I said MILL. But so I've worked at places like that where it's just like there is something off here. You know what I mean? There is a darkness here, right? But then like, and so if it's obviously a pattern, that's really not going to look good for you. You know what I mean? Like in terms of that speaks to you need to figure out employee retention, communication, and a productive work environment, right? Systems, procedures, flow. But if it's like like people are stealing from you, or like, like there's like all these things happening, like just like he was saying, like a lot of people give benefit of the doubt, like, oh, we're all human, or like just too many chances before letting go, or because they don't even want to have the conversation, or because they hired someone that they know personally, Um, but like, so on some levels, I've had a discussion with someone about half a year ago now, I guess, damn, talking about how you need to respect people, like you need to respect if you have somebody's paycheck in your hands, like you need to respect that their living is in your hands and not just fire someone for no fucking reason, not just throw people away for no fucking reason. You know what I mean? But if, there are huge red flags and it's not just like everything has been fine before, but you have one difference of opinion one day, now all of a sudden you just don't like each other. What the fuck? Then, but the work is still good, then maybe I would keep them because you know what, you don't have to like everybody that you work with. But if it's like this is unethical type shit, or this is you literally, what the fuck, there's just no work gonna get done type thing. Like, there's a difference between like allowing someone to be human and giving them too many chances. And then there's also a difference between not allowing someone to be human at all and not giving them really a chance at all. You know what I mean? And so only you really know what that balance is for you. But yeah, it's all shit to consider. It is shit that is hard to work with at first,
Painfully aware to everyone. It's not a case of a few screw-ups. It's a case where every time someone's working, it's not like they screw up once or twice. Anyone will screw up once or twice, or more times than that. And you should be like very loving, not take it out on them, like be a team, work together. If someone is getting every decision wrong, that's when you need to act. And at that point, it'll be painfully aware to everyone. It's not a case of a few screw-ups. It's a case where every time someone does something, you would have done the opposite yourself. You don't get to make their decisions, but you do get to choose the decision makers. And if someone's doing everything wrong, just like a consistent thing over like a period of many weeks or a month, you'll be aware of it. This is one of those cases where in theory it sounds complicated to be sure what you're talking about, and in practice, there's almost never any doubt. It's the difference between someone making one or two mistakes and just constantly screwing everything up or causing problems or making everyone unhappy is painfully obvious the first time you see it. Yes?
When should co-founders decide on the equity split?
Great question. When should co-founders decide on the equity split? For some reason, I've never really been sure why this is. A lot of co-founders like to leave this off for a very long time. They'll even sign the incorporation documents in some crazy way so that they can wait to have this discussion. This is not a discussion that gets easier with time. You want to set this ideally, very soon after you start working together, and it should be near equal. If you're not willing to give someone, your co-founder, like an equal share of the equity, I think that should make you think hard about whether or not you want them to co-founder. But in any case, you should try to have the ink dry on this before the company gets too far along, like certainly in the first number of weeks. Yes.
Okay, but then how do you know if it's going to be crippling and fire that way?
So the question is, I said that inexperience is okay. How do you know if that's going to, if someone's going to scale past, not scale up to a role as things go on and later become crippling? People that are really smart and that can learn new things can almost always find a role in the company as time goes on. You may have to move them into something else, something other than where they started. Maybe that you hire someone to lead the engineering team that over time can't scale as you get up to 50 people, and you give them a different role. Really good people that can almost always find some great place in the company. I have not seen that be a problem too often.
What if your relationship with your founder or founders breaks down over time? You're ready to split equity and what's the best way?
All right, so the question is what happens when your relationship with your co-founder falls apart? We're going to have a session on mechanics near the end of the course, but here's the most important thing that founders screw up, which is every co-founder, you yourself of course, has to have vesting. Basically what you're doing with co-founder vesting is you're pre-negotiating what happens if one of you leaves. And so the normal stance on this in Silicon Valley is that it takes 4 years, let's say you split the equity 50-50, it takes 4 years to earn all of that. And the clock doesn't start until 1 year in. So if you leave after 1 year, you keep 25% of the equity. If you leave after 2 years, 50, and on and on like that. If you don't do that, and if you have a huge fallout, and one founder leaves early on with half the company, you have like this dead weight on your equity table. And it's very hard to get investors to fund you or to do anything else. So number one piece of advice to prevent that is to have vesting on the equity. We pretty much won't fund a company now where the founders don't have vested equity, because it's just that bad. The other thing to do.
Oh, he's basically also saying like, I feel like a lot of people know what the fuck this means, but just in case you don't, there's nothing wrong with not knowing for those who are new to this shit. But he's basically, in other words, saying they need to get this shit in writing and make it legal, and there will be different legal procedures for their state also that can be followed, but between those two, that will be determining the equity. You know what I mean?
Is as soon as problems come up in the relationship between the co-founders, which happens to some degree in every company, talk about it early. Don't let it just sit off there and fester.
If you have to choose between hiring an employee that's not ideal and losing your users to another competitor, what do you do?
If you have to choose between hiring a suboptimal employee and losing your customers to a competitor, what do you do? If it would be one of the first 5, say, employees of a company, I would lose those customers. I think the damage that it does to the company, you don't want to. It's better to lose some customers than kill the company. Later on, I might have a slightly different opinion, but it's really hard to say in the general case.
I think this is entirely situational for me. Why are you choosing between the customers and the employees? You know what I mean? Like, say the employees are all grouped together and involved in sexual assault on somebody, then you choose your customers, right? Like, this is entirely situational. But I mean, if you're going with, like, because typically, like, more than one customer going against a group of employees doesn't typically happen unless it's like, but I mean, for startups though, I mean unless it's someone that's going to cause major damage to society, then it's typically that company's mission anyway, and they don't give a fuck. But you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just trying to think. But like, I'm like, that one just, I was like,
One more question, I'll keep going. Yes?
What's your experience with co-founders who aren't working in the same location?
I'm going to get to that later. The question is, what about co-founders not working in the same location? Don't do it. I am skeptical of remote teams in general, but in the early days of a startup.
So this is like 10 years ago, before remote work really became popular, and it was way more popular to basically discredit remote work and act like remote work wasn't feasible or whatever. And like, if you worked from home, you're basically treated like you weren't valid in business. You know what I mean? It's a whole new world now. Like, a lot of people do not give a fuck if you work from home. In fact, a lot of times it's encouraged or promoted in some places. So, this part I think that's where he wasn't predicting where the future technology and trends would go, in my opinion, or thinking like longevity. Like, he wasn't thinking about, like, this is where, what was that fucking video app that no one uses anymore called? Didn't it start with like a Z? Shit. And I can remember how the beginning of it, like, it would go dun, dun, dun. I don't know. Now I'm not doing it right. But, like, it had, like, this little, like, tune thingy. Shit, why can't I think of it? What was that video app? From like 2010s. Now I just need to go video meeting app. What the fuck was it called? Skype. Okay. I couldn't think of the word Skype. My bad. But anyway, fucking like, so basically Skype was the main video app of choice at this time, and it really didn't maintain good connection, and camera quality wasn't as good, 10 years ago, and there's just like a lot of shit. Like it wasn't really popular. Like, so I could see like, and it wasn't. I mean, even though we had internet, people weren't using it to communicate and streamline communications in the same way that we are now. But now it's just like, yeah, I feel like it's a whole different world when it comes to remote work. So basically, everything he says about remote working, I think I disagree with.
Where communication and speed outweigh everything else. For whatever reason, video conferencing or calls just don't work that well. The data on this is look at the, say, like 30 most.
And again, he's saying look at the software startups at all time. They haven't been doing this. Look at the context of their existence and their reality. The most successful software startups didn't start up with this technology being as integrated as it has become. And to my knowledge, these days, a lot of these successful startups are using these technologies. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like this isn't like a good logical connection in my opinion. Like look at the data before we couldn't even do this shit. So obviously, and it's not going to work out in the future. Like that's not a good explanation to me because he's not taking into account where technology could go here. And I know I'm being able to look at it now from the future where, well, the present, but his future, from where technology has gone. But fucking, or your past, who knows? But you know what? Whatever. Fucking but it's just like weird too because he was just talking about predicting where technology and where businesses are going to go, and here he is. I'm like, you're missing the mark. I'm like, okay, I know it's one thing, you can't predict everything, but the way he completely shits on the concept of remote work being possible, in my opinion, it's just like, it's one thing to not like it as much, but to completely discredit its feasibility and is something that I don't really agree with. Like, I feel like he could have discussed the cons and at least acknowledge the pros of it.
Successful software startups of all time and try to point to a single example where the co-founders were in different locations. It's really, really tough.
And it's not hard anymore. It's very common now. So let's just think of some examples. So there's Kipwise. Here's one. Does the Do We Know Them podcast count? I know they're in different states. You know what I mean? RoboFlow, apparently, that's one. They're out here, but I just feel like it's fucking possible. Fuck it. Anyway.
All right, we'll skip a little bit of this. All right, so now we're gonna talk about execution. Execution for most founders is not the most fun part of starting a company, but it is often the most critical. Most people that start a company think that they are signing up, they have this brilliant idea, and then they're just gonna like be on magazine covers and go to parties. But really what it's about, more than anything else, what being a founder means is signing up for this years-long grind on execution. And you can't outsource this. The way to have a company that executes well is to execute well yourself. Everything in a startup gets modeled after the founders. Whatever the founders do becomes the culture. So if you want a culture where people work hard and pay attention to detail and focus on the customer and are frugal, you have to do it yourself. There's no other way. You cannot hire a COO and have them do this while you go off to conferences. The company just needs to see you as like this maniacal execution machine. As I said in the first lecture, there's like 100 times at least more people with great ideas than people that are willing to put in the effort to execute them well. Ideas by themselves are not worth anything. Only executing well is what adds value, or what creates value. A big part of execution is just putting in the effort, but there's a lot you can learn about how to be good at it. And so we're going to have, I think, 3 classes that just talk about this. So the CEO, people ask me a bunch of times, like the jobs of a startup CEO. And there are probably more than 5, but here are 5 that come up a lot in the early days. The first 4 I think everyone thinks of as CEO jobs. Set the vision, raise money, evangelize the company to people you're trying to recruit, existing employees, partners, press, customers, everybody. Hire and manage the team. But the fifth one.
Okay, notice the fifth one. It's make sure the entire company executes. Now back on the Madeline Pendleton situation, where she was acting like it wasn't her job to deal with customers. But in my opinion, part of the CEO's job is to make sure that the entire company is executing. So even if she doesn't want to respond to a customer herself, it is her job to make sure that a customer service rep has executed on that, in my opinion. You know what I mean? That's just me though. Okay, I apologize. But
is that setting the execution bar. And this is not something that most founders get excited about or think about themselves doing, but I think is actually one of the critical CEO roles, and no one but the CEO can do this. Execution gets divided into two key questions. One, can you figure out what to do? And two is, can you get it done? So I want to talk about two parts of getting it done, assuming that you've already figured out what to do. And those are focus and intensity. So focus is critical. One of my favorite questions to ask founders is what they're spending their time and their money on. This reveals almost everything about what founders think is important. One of the hardest parts about being a founder is that there are 100 important things competing for your attention every day. And you have to identify the right 2 or 3, work on those, and then ignore or delegate or defer the rest. And a lot of these things that founders think are really important, interviewing a lot of different law firms, going to conferences, recruiting advisors, whatever, they just don't matter, right? And what really does matter varies with time, but it's an important piece of meta advice. You need to figure out what the 2 or 3 most important things are, and then just do those. And you can only have 2 or 3 things every day, because everything else will just come at you, fires of the day. And if you don't get really good at setting what these 2 or 3 priorities are every day, you'll never be great at actually getting stuff done. This is really hard for founders, right? Founders are people that get excited by starting new things. Unfortunately, the trick to great execution is to say no a lot. You're saying no 97 times out of 100. And most founders find that they have to make a very conscious effort to do this. Most startups are not nearly focused enough. They work really hard, maybe, but they don't work hard on the right things, and you'll still fail. One of the great and terrible things about starting a startup is that you get no credit for trying. You only get points when you make something that the market wants. So if you work really hard on the wrong things, no one will care. So then there's this question of how do you figure out what to focus on each day? And this is where it's really important to have goals. Most good founders that I know at any given time have a small number of overarching goals for the company. Everybody in the company knows. It could be things like ship a product by this date, maintain this growth rate, get this certain engagement rate, hire for these key roles, get this deal done. But anybody could tell you in the company every week what are our key goals. And then
I will say, I think a lot of people where they go wrong with business is they care more about vanity metrics in terms of how many people are liking their post, and then what are their conversion rates and what are their sales. They care more about getting views, followers, and likes than about actually building community or even worrying about converting that engagement into sales. So on a certain level, yeah, you need engagement, because without engagement, you won't get sales or build community. But on another level, which should not be intertwined, those are separate things. But they can be intertwined. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm making sense. Your sense of community shouldn't come from profiting off of them, but at the same time, when you're in business with people, you're building a community with them. You know what I mean? Am I making sense? But yeah, fucking or at least under capitalism, colonialism. I don't know. Fucking so yeah, it's just about being able to just I don't know. What the fuck was I saying here? Let's scroll up. Hold up. Oh yeah. Metrics. It's just about understanding what's actually gonna help you move the needle forward with your business, because yeah, likes and engagement are nice, but if you're not getting sales, that doesn't matter as much. So let that marinate and balance.
and everybody executes based off of that. The founder really does set the focus. Whatever the founder cares about, whatever the founders think are the key goals, that's going to be what the whole company focuses on. And the best founders repeat these goals over and over, far more often than they think they should need to. They put them up on the walls, they talk about them in one-on-ones, all hands meeting every week. But it keeps the company focused. One of the keys to focus, and why I said I think co-founders in different places struggle, is that you can't be focused without really great communication. Even if you only have, say, 4 or 5 people in a company, a small communication breakdown is enough for everybody to be working on slightly different things. And then you lose focus and the company just scrambles.
Yeah, community, that's actually really important too, because like I've been in situations where like I will literally list out everything that I'm aware of that I know I need help with. And I said, okay, these are 20 things that I know I need help with. And they're like, okay, do you need help with anything else? And I'm like, no, not that I'm aware of. If there's anything that I need to know about, tell me, please. Basically, that's what I'm saying. And they didn't tell me shit. They tell me I'm doing great and I'm doing brilliant. And then later they want to act like I wasn't doing enough to communicate if I needed help. I'm like, bitch, I asked you like 20 fucking questions. What the fuck? I asked you, and I said I wasn't aware of anything else, but please tell me if you knew. if you saw something I wasn't seeing in myself, and then you said I was doing good. So it's like, sometimes though, it's like, really though, when you communicate, be upfront, okay? Don't, it's okay to process something later. That happens. We're human beings. But I hate it when people aren't upfront with me and then act like I should have known some shit you didn't fucking tell me. Like, I'm not a goddamn fucking mind reader, alright? Suck my fucking dick. And I also fucking hate when people fucking tell me that they're fine with something 1 minute and they're not fine with it later. Make up your fucking mind, bitch. I don't give a fuck, but make up your fucking mind. You know what? Alright, I'm sorry. But it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change your mind. I'm just saying, if you change your mind, don't act like I should have known you changed your mind if you didn't fucking tell me. Alright? Okay. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. But here's an ad. So yeah, anyway, now back to our reaction.
I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but growth and momentum are something you can never lose focus on. Growth and momentum are what a startup lives on, and you always have to focus on maintaining these. You should always know how you're doing against your metrics. You should have a weekly review meeting every week, and you should be extremely suspicious if you're ever talking about, we're not focused on growth right now, we're not growing that well right now, but we're doing this other thing. We don't have a timeline for when we're going to ship this because we're focused on this other thing. We're doing a rebrand, whatever. Almost always a disaster. So you want to have the right metrics, and you want to be focused on growing those metrics and having momentum. Don't let the company get distracted or excited by other things. A common mistake is that companies get excited by their own PR. It's really easy to get PR with no results, and it feels like you're actually really cool. But in a year, you'll still have nothing, and at that point, you won't be cool anymore. And you'll just be talking about these articles from a year ago that, like these Stanford students start this new startup that's going to be the next big thing, and now you have nothing, and that sucks. And then, as I mentioned already, be in the same space. This is like, I think this is pretty much a non-starter. Remote co-founding teams is just really, really hard. It slows down the cycle time more than anybody ever thinks it's going to. The other piece, besides focus for execution, is intensity. Startups only work at a fairly intense level. A friend of mine says that the secret to startup success is extreme focus and extreme dedication. You can have like a startup and one other thing, you can have a startup and a family, but you probably can't have many other hobbies. Startups are not the best choice for work-life balance, and that's sort of just the sad reality. There's a lot of great things about a startup, but this is not one of them. They're all consuming in a way that is difficult to explain. You generally need to be willing to outwork your competitors.
I also think this can depend on what your role is at the company as well. If you're in a management level position and your own salary and you don't get paid overtime, then being in a startup is gonna suck ass. So you're gonna want to ask for that higher salary to ensure that, because a lot of people, I don't believe in it, but it's the reality of what to expect in the world we live in. If you go work for startups out there, what I've experienced is they will work you to death. And so if you're compensated enough, you might not give a fuck about the hours, but if you go into it with a salary for what you would expect at 40 hours at a startup, you may find yourself very unhappy. So set very realistic expectations on the amount of hours you're going to be working and lock it into your contract, a cap on the hours you'll work, in my opinion, potentially, or figure something out to where you're going to be happy with that pay for the hours you're going to be putting in. And that's not every role at a startup, because some roles at a startup really don't require you particularly to be there. But yeah, if you expect that.
The good news here, wow, that's hard to see, is that a small amount of extra work on the right thing makes a huge difference. One example that I like to give is thinking about the viral coefficient for a consumer web product. How many new users each existing user brings in. If it's 0.99, the company will eventually flatline and die. If it's 1.01, you'll be in this happy place of exponential growth forever. So this is just one concrete example of where a tiny bit of extra work is the difference between success and failure. And when we talk to successful founders, they tell stories like this all the time. Just outworking their competitors by a little bit was what made them successful. So you have to be really intense. This only comes from the CEO. This only comes from the founders. One of the biggest advantages that startups have is execution speed, and you have to have this relentless operating rhythm. Facebook has this famous poster that says, "Move fast and break things." But at the same time, they manage to be obsessed with quality. And this is why it's hard. It's easy to move fast or be obsessed with quality. The trick is that you have to do both at a startup. You need to have a culture where people have very high quality standards for everything the company does, but still move quickly. Apple, Facebook.
Okay, the move fast, get shit done thing reminded me, someone once told me it was better to get shit done. So he wanted me to email someone for him. So then I replied, is this what you want me to say to them? And he was like, yeah. So then I did. He got fucking mad at me because I had apparently sent him the wrong fucking email. But I thought it was the right email. And so I'm like checking off a whole to-do list because I got a bunch of shit to do. And he's like livid, and I'm like, okay, it really doesn't. I mean, yeah, obviously we shouldn't be, emailing random people shit, but in this case, I was just like, you know what? It's actually totally fine, because no one gave a fuck. No one actually really got that message. It got bounced anyway to a from an email list where people couldn't even see it. Didn't even fucking matter. But he was like infuriated at the concept of it being the wrong email. However, there's obviously you want to make sure you're sending the right email to the right people. I actually really thought I was. And it's like I sent so many emails every day that if I were to actually sit there and go confirm each person's email before I emailed them, I wouldn't be very productive in my opinion, right? But and so it was just like the way. It's one thing to be upset too, because I'm an emotional fuck. So like if I'm upset that something happened, even if I don't want to take it out on the person, I'm not good at not expressing that I'm upset about something, you know. But like it was the way, like I was like, don't make people feel like shit for just fucking trying to do what the fuck you just said to do, right? Like goddamn fuck shit.
And Google have all done this extremely well. It's not just about the product. It's about everything they do. They move fast and they break things, and they're frugal in the right places, but they care about quality everywhere. You don't buy people shitty computers if you don't want them to write shitty code. You do have to set a quality bar that runs through the entire company. Related to this is that you have to be decisive. Indecisiveness is a startup killer. Mediocre founders spend a lot of time talking about grand plans, but they never quite make this decision. They're talking about, well, I could do this thing that sounds great, or I could do this other thing, and they keep going back and forth and they don't act. And what you actually need is this bias towards action. The best founders work on things that seem small, but they move really quickly. They get things done really quickly. Every time you talk to the best founders, they've gotten new things done. In fact, this is the one thing that we've learned best predicts the success of founders in YC. If every time we talk to a team, they've gotten new things done, that's the best predictor we have that the company will go on to be successful. Part of this is that you can do huge things in incremental pieces. If you just keep knocking down small chunks one at a time, in a year you look back and you've done this amazing thing. On the other hand, if you disappear for a year and you expect to come back with something amazing all at once, it usually never happens. So you have to pick these right-sized projects. Even if you're building this crazy synthetic biology company, most people would say, well, I have to go away for a year. I can't do this incrementally. There's almost always a way to break it down into smaller projects. So speed is this huge premium, right? The best founders usually respond to email the most quickly. They make decisions the most quickly. They're generally quick in all these different ways. And they just have this do whatever it takes attitude. They also show up a lot. They come to meetings, they come in, they meet us in person. One piece of advice that I have that's always worked for me is they get on planes in marginal situations. How are we doing on time? I'll tell a quick story here. When I was running my own company, we found out that we were about to lose a deal. It was sort of this critical deal from the first big customer in the space, and it was going to go to this company that had been around for years before we were, and they had us like all locked up. So we called and said, hey, we have this better product, you gotta meet with us. They said, you know what, we're signing this deal tomorrow, sorry. We drove to the airport, got on a plane. We were at their office at 6 a.m. the next morning. We just sat there, they told us to go away. We just kept sitting there. Finally, one of the junior guys decided to meet with us. Finally, after that, one of the senior guys decided to meet with us. They ended up ripping up the contract with this other company, and we closed the deal with them about a week later. And I'm sure that had we not gotten on a plane, had we not shown up in person, that would not have worked out. And so you just sort of like, you show up, you do these things, It's, when people say get on planes in marginal situations, they usually mean it, well, they don't usually mean it literally, but I think it's actually good literal advice.
And in this situation, whatever deal they had must have been so amazing that it was worth it. But that's also a huge risk. Like you could be doing that, putting all of those resources in, and they not accept the deal. So if you decide to make this type of bold ass move for your own business, make sure you can do it in a way where if you didn't get that resources back, you would be fine. That you can spend that money and it will be fine. Or burn that bridge and it would be fine, because in some cases this might ruin a relationship. They'd be like, the fuck are you doing here? Get the fuck away, never come back, You gotta not only have like a really good offer, but also be very careful about if or how you do this. And sometimes you could do everything like as politely as possible, but just still trying to like just show you care. And they still might be like, fuck you, so you're putting that type of story does come with a lot of risk, but I'm glad it paid off for him.
All right, I'll skip that part then. So I mentioned this momentum and growth earlier. Once more, the momentum and growth are the lifeblood of startups. This is probably in the top 3 secrets to executing well. You want a company to be winning all the time. If you ever take your foot off the gas pedal, things will spiral out of control, snowball downwards. A winning team feels good and keeps winning. A team that hasn't won in a while gets demotivated and keeps losing. So always keep momentum is this prime directive for managing a startup. If I can only tell founders one thing about how to run a company, it would be this. For most software startups, this translates to keep growing. For hardware startups, it translates to don't let your ship date slip. This is what we tell people during YC, and they usually listen and everything's good. What happens after the end of YC is that they get distracted on other things, and then growth slows down. And somehow, after that happens, people start getting unhappy and quitting, and then everything falls apart. It's hard to figure out a growth engine because most companies grow in new ways, but there's this thing about if you build a good product, it will grow. And so getting this product right at the beginning is the best way to not lose momentum later. If you do lose momentum, most founders try to get it back in the wrong way. They give these long speeches about vision for the company, and they try to rally the troops with speeches. But employees in a company where momentum has sagged don't want to hear that. You have to save the vision speeches for when the company is winning. When you're not winning, you just have to get momentum back in small wins. A board member of mine used to say that sales fix everything in a startup, and that is really true. So you figure out where you can get these small wins and you get that done. And then you'll be amazed how all the other problems in the startup disappear. Another thing that you'll notice if you have momentum sag is that everyone starts disagreeing about what to do. Fights come out when a company loses momentum.
Okay, so in some ways, sales can fix everything, because if you get sales coming in and you're going to have money, it fits the problems happening, right? But another level, if you're selling something that can't be fixed, then that may not fix everything. You know what I mean? Sales doesn't always, it can fix everything, but it doesn't always fix everything. If, like, for example, you can have a lot of sales come in, but not have the work procedures in place to actually take all the workload and the customers, and so then people aren't happy with you, right? So you were making sales, but were you able to provide a quality result, right? And maintain those relationships, right? Or you could have a bunch of sales come in and, you know, just any number of things go wrong. And so that is a thing. It can fix everything when sales go well. If they go.
And so a framework for that I think works is that when there's disagreement among the team about what to do, then you ask your users and you do whatever your users tell you. And you have to remind people, like, hey, stuff's not working right now. We don't actually hate each other. We just need to get back on track and everything will work. And if you just call it out, if you just acknowledge that, you'll find that things get way better. To use a Facebook example again, when Facebook's growth slowed in 2008, Mark instituted a growth group. They worked on very small things to make Facebook grow faster. All of these by themselves seemed really small, but they got the curve of Facebook back up. It quickly became the most prestigious group there. Mark has said that it's been one of Facebook's best innovations. According to friends of mine that worked at Facebook at the time, it really turned around the dynamic of the company. And it went from this thing where everyone was feeling bad and momentum was gone, back to a place that was winning. So a good way to keep momentum is to establish an operating rhythm in the company early, where you ship product and launch new features on this regular basis, where you're reviewing metrics, every week with the entire company. This is actually one of the best things your board can do for you. Boards add value to business strategy only rarely, but very frequently you can use them as a forcing function to get the company to care about metrics and milestones. One thing that often disrupts momentum and really shouldn't is competitors. Competitors making noise in the press, I think, probably crushes a company's momentum more often than any other external factor. So here's a good rule of thumb. Don't worry about a competitor at all until they're actually beating you with a real shipped product. Press releases are easier to write than code, and that is still easier than making a great product. So remind your company of this and don't.
I mean, honestly, unless a competitor is like trying to copy you and steal your shit, you don't really have to. Whenever competitors exist, I just take that as an opportunity to learn from what they're doing, as well as to find ways to differentiate myself more, to give people more reasons to buy from me, So there's ways that you can deal with it. My captioner is being fucky, so I'm going to refresh this. Alright, so, yeah.
This is sort of a founder's role, is not to let the company get down because of the competitors in the press. This great quote from Henry Ford that I love. The competitor to be feared is one who never bothers about you at all, but goes on making his own business better all the time. These are almost never the companies that put out a lot of press releases, and they bump people out. Should we move on to this section? You know what, we'll cover this in a later lecture. I will talk about finance, deal making, and distribution. Are there any questions? Okay, so on Tuesday, Paul Graham is going to speak. See you then. Thank you.
Alrighty, so that is the end of our lecture. So, there's a lot of good material in there. There's also a good bit that I don't agree with, particularly some of the things where it came to hiring people. I had some thoughts, but I also felt like he also gave a lot of good advice. And then there's just some things that I felt like they were good stories, but I feel in context, unless he explained some caveats and the warnings to the students later, I felt like maybe it wouldn't, when you tell some of these stories without explaining the warnings to them, for some people, they may just take the example as things to do without understanding the risks involved. For example, like with the plain deal situation, like where he was like like going to a meeting where they had told them not to come or something like that. But anyway, so things like that. Like I feel like that's a bold move, but and then the remote work situation. Obviously, I disagreed with what he was saying on that. Look at hello. And so fucking but hey, we can all agree to disagree on this. So um, but yeah, just to recap what we watched and talked about today. So, we began mainly discussing the Neil Gorsuch, Philip Anschutz situation. So, earlier this year, we had covered the other Supreme Court case, which was the Loper Bright Enterprise versus Raimondo situation, where the Chevron deference was overturned. Um, and we discussed how uh, Philip Anschutz and Neil Gorsuch mutually benefited from that. And now we're looking at how people are saying that Neil Gorsuch should recuse again for the same reasons again in this other case regarding Seven County Infrastructure Coalition versus Eagle County, Colorado, where it's about more environmental and transportation issues as it impacts this basin as well. Uh, I can't speak. Basin. Is it basin? Basin? Basin. Okay, well, both came out right. Basin? Nope. Basin? Nope. Basin? Basin? Shit, I can't say the word. I honestly don't know how to say it right. Sorry, y'all. Anyway, fucking. Um, so in this new case, the actual court case hasn't happened yet, and so to my knowledge, but when I will cover that as well. Um, and I might do another live stream. I'll check out what SCOTUS blog has said on it. SCOTUS. SCOTUS blog. I tried. I will see what they have to say on it, and I will check out like if there's any updates on anything to cover. But I'll probably wait until some things happen in court to cover that situation. But I will cover more of that, obviously, and try and keep an eye out for that also. So yeah, so coming up, we've got the Neil Gorsuch and Philip Anschutz coverage, and that all relates back to basically every industry in America, basically, in my opinion. We can find ties there. Um, and yeah, fucking, I discussed a little bit the Kaze, Casze, Cynderra, Kazanthia White situation versus Raylee Rukavina Wells. A little bit because if you go watch the first video on lecture 1 I did for the how to start a startup, that one fucking I had covered my first coverage on the Rayleigh Kaze situation, and so there's been like way more to the story since then. So if you do go watch my commentary on that lecture 1, again, I highly recommend, if you're paying attention to that wedding dress drama, go check the updates too if you're interested in all of that, because there's way more to that story if you don't know about it already. Um, so yeah, fucking, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job explaining what happened, but all of the articles for everything that we've discussed is linked in the description of this video, so please go check all that out. Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know shit about the law, obviously. This is just my interpretation of reality, or what the fuck I'm reading. So yeah, come to your own conclusions, because I could be wrong. This is just what I think based on what I know, based on what I saw. Fucking, and regarding my experience, as we discussed with my introduction, like I do have 13 years experience owning a business. So when I do the how to start a startup playlist, for me, again, it's for people who are working in business to be able to better understand what type of business they want to work for. It's for people who are building their business to understand what type of business they want to build. You know what I mean? So yeah. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you. I will try to remember to link all of this shit that I said I'd link in the description or the comments of this video, but if I forget anything, that's my bad. And yeah, thank you for your time and bye. Thanks for watching. Join the loyalty program at noladeafchild.com/loyalty and check in during live streams to get points for rewards.